As we're talking about this, I think it's interesting. CNN, this is a Free Thought Project, CNN retracts their own fake news as Americans label them the least trusted cable news network. And of course, this is the sort of thing where they are just collapsing, even though we have exposed all the lies. We're going to talk about this more later in the program. We talked about it a great deal yesterday. The phony narrative that they're selling us about the Russian involvement in this election, and what they really want you to hear is that the Russians got in and rigged the machines. That's why they keep using the term hack. You see, we exposed, and it wasn't just the Russians, it was everybody that publicized this. Mainstream media wouldn't talk about it. Mainstream media was colluding with Hillary behind the scenes. That's one of the things that was exposed. So if you tell the truth about Hillary, you tell the truth about mainstream media, then they say you hacked the election. And now they're using that image that they have created to try to insinuate themselves into the actual voting machines. And that's what we really need to be afraid of. And of course, Donald Trump said to reporters, he said, look, no computer is ever safe. If you have something important, write it down on a piece of paper, give it to a courier, have it hand delivered. That's the way our elections should be run. Your vote is too important to be put on a computer because then it is hackable. Your vote should be written down on a piece of paper. There should be multiple eyewitnesses at every stage, making sure that the ballots are not stuffed, that the actual ballots and only the actual ballots are transmitted to the next stage. That is precisely what we need. We need to have a paper system, not the voting machines that can be hacked. Now, one of the ways that they're going to attack Donald Trump, of course, is going to be coming after him for his so-called conflict of interest. And now we see Elizabeth Warren taking the point on this. We're going to talk about this on the other side of the hour. We're going to talk about how Elizabeth Warren, the school marm, is out there talking about Trump has to get rid of his conflict of interest. We're going to tell you why that's not really going to be possible, why it's not even a good idea. Believe me, it's not a good idea. We don't want to just have lawyers, politicians, and community organizers. We want people who've really accomplished things. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I want to continue with what we were talking about an hour ago when we talked about CNN retracting their own fake news. I didn't go into as much detail, and I want to tell you what was behind that. Of course, we talked about it when it came out. They had a former deputy director of the CIA go on CNN's New Day. The guy's name is Phil Mudd. I guess his name is now Mudd, literally. He called Julian Assange a pedophile on CNN, and WikiLeaks immediately tweeted, "We have issued instructions to sue CNN for defamation, unless within 48 hours they air a 1-hour expose of the plot against Assange." It didn't take long, they point out, for CNN to issue a retraction. As Free Thought Project points out, they have now been labeled by Americans as the least trusted cable news network. And of course, CNN really is the CIA news network. We've talked about that a long time. It's interesting to see these attacks coming from the CIA, openly leading the attack. People like Michael Morrell, who was always part of the Never Trumpers, who always opposed Donald Trump, supported Hillary Clinton. He took over from David Petraeus. And so even though he got his job because David Petraeus violated national security regulations, and even though he saw Hillary Clinton get away with violating national security regulations, he supported Hillary Clinton. And he said, you're going to have massive resignations from the intelligence services because of Donald Trump, because he doesn't trust us. Why would he trust you? Why would anybody in their right mind trust you? We're going to show you some clips in the next hour that are absolutely amazing, that really underscore that. And of course, in their retraction, I want to read this to you from what CNN said. An analyst on air today earlier asserted that Julian Assange was a pedophile and regrets saying it. In fact, CNN has no evidence to support that assertion. Of course they don't. That doesn't keep them from making these assertions. Assange, they said, is currently wanted for extradition to Sweden to face sexual assault allegations. And I'll underscore that and say these are allegations. He's not been convicted. He has not been indicted. And then they go on to say there is no evidence to suggest that the women alleged were minors. Okay, so it is absolutely not about pedophilia, but that is where they are. And now WikiLeaks has doubled down again and said that Hillary Clinton earned $100,000 from ISIS. And they're pointing out how there have been certain emails She archived emails like, quote, the Library of Alexandria, where there is proof within those emails that she knowingly armed jihadists, including ISIS. So this is gradually coming out. We saw this tape from John Kerry that, of course, the New York Times saw, but they chose not to report on. But eventually the truth comes out, and we learned that John Kerry didn't care what he was doing, who he was hurting, who he was supporting in Syria. He would give ISIS their caliphate if it meant that he could get what he wanted. In this particular case, what he wanted was regime change, and he didn't care how many children died. He didn't care how many countries he bombed into oblivion. And, of course, they tell us that they're fighting ISIS, and yet we see them dropping by parachute equipment to them. We see the lies about sarin gas that we pushed back on in 2013 when they tried to get us to be al-Qaeda's Air Force, but they're still operating as al-Qaeda's Air Force. As the Russians pointed out, we've had 25,000 bombs dropped in the last couple of years by Obama in Syria and Iraq. Guess what? Not a single one of them landed on an ISIS-controlled oil field. And the Russians said, isn't that miraculous? Yes, isn't it? What a serendipitous coincidence that not a single bomb landed on ISIS oil fields, very easily set on fire. And we've seen over and over again the long convoys of weapons, and we saw people reporting it, streaming it live, and yet they couldn't manage to send a drone over and attack those convoys, could they? The convoys of oil, the convoys of weapons. So we know that they were complicit. We know that they organized it. We know that they funded it. They trained them. They transported rebels from Chechnya into Syria to use them as surrogates. The CIA has been using Islamicists as surrogates for a long time. The mask has now come off. The mask has come off of their Operation Mockingbird projects, and now they are openly propagandizing Americans. Here's another bit of propaganda. This one is coming from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And they're saying on the Washington Post, where else would you put this kind of nonsense fake news? Headline, Washington Post, without action on climate change, say goodbye to the polar bears. They're going to drown out there. They can only swim, I think, 300 miles a day. They're all going to go away because all the ice is melting, according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Except we also see at the same time, there's one of them. He's so forlorn on that ice floe there. He's not unable to swim away. He's just helpless. But we also see pictures of Venice, and we see the canals drying up in Venice. Now, how is that happening at the same time? Why are the canals in Venice drying up? We were told that Venice was going to be underwater. Go to this story from Climate Depot. Logbook expedition to Antarctica more than 100 years ago raises troubling new doubts about global warming. And this goes back to the end of November. Why should there be so much excitement over the discovery from the logbooks of two of Britain's most famous explorers more than 100 years ago that there was the same amount of ice floating around Antarctica then as there is today? To the surprise of academics from the University of Reading, the records kept by the expeditions of Captain Robert Scott and Sir Ernest Shackleton in the early years of the last century detail the extent of ice cover, the state of the sea, and the weather. They were very astute observers, and they did things like keep diaries and journals and logs, and they showed that there was remarkably little change in the extent of sea ice at the other end of the world. The data collected by these and other explorers, said Dr. Jonathan Day, could profoundly change the way we view the ebb and flow of Antarctic sea ice. We know that sea ice in the Antarctic has increased slightly over the past 30 years since satellite observations began. See, they don't even have a good base. When they do have a good base and they start looking at it with satellite observations and they say, oh, it's increasing. When they go back and they look at the diaries of 100 years ago, they say, hey, it's the same. Looks like it's the same. And the same thing is true of the temperature readings that they get. It's totally false. Why is it when they can't project the weather? And we went to the AMS, American Meteorological Society meeting here in Austin a couple of years ago, and everybody is working very hard to try to predict the weather 2 days away and not doing it very successfully. And now we're supposed to believe their projections 50 years out based on what these climate models are totally phony. They've already been disproven in the short time we've had them. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Infowars has more than 15 YouTube channels and about 3 million subscribers. Our main channel has 1.854 or 1,854,000 plus subscribers. Now, they've been gaming the system for a long time to shut down nationalistic or patriotic media, saying we're right-wingers, saying we're extremists. Well, it doesn't matter who we are. We have a right to free speech, don't we? As long as we don't violate the rules. Well, now Zuckerberg has come out and said he's going to restrict conservative news like communist China does, calling it fake news. And Google, that owns YouTube, has announced, and they've done it now 2 weeks ago, that they're going to basically make you click the bell in your notifications. We're going to show you how to do that, or you won't get all the channels that you've subscribed to and you won't get the videos. Now, why are they doing this? It's more than just censoring. They want you to see the videos that they feed you below and beside the videos you're looking at that are corporately sponsored so they make more money. They're taking the you out of YouTube. So we're in this information war, and it's more important than ever that you promote the videos, that you like the videos, and that you send them on to others. Because the answer to the attempt to shut us down and restrict free speech that's openly now happening is for us to redouble our efforts. We're winning the culture war as true classical liberals that made this country great. We're restoring the Renaissance. So again, if you want to get our videos, so you can make your decision whether you want to see them or not. After all, that's why you subscribed. YouTube's had this since they started 12 years ago or whatever it was. And they're fundamentally changing it so you don't get it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is promoting fake news and trash news and establishment news. It's killing real independent news. But we the people, by taking action, can break the back of this system. So please, click on the bell so you get the notifications and so you get in your feed the videos and channels you've subscribed to. I'm Alex Jones for Infowars.com.